Okay, I should note a couple of things. First of all, that I will be echoing a lot of themes that have already been mentioned today, which is great. This session is working quite nicely. Also, compared to soccer, triathlon, which I'll be talking about, has a much better track record. However, I do believe in the 50-50 rule myself, and the journey towards gender equality is still some way to go within the sport of triathlon, and ultimately I would like to point to the air of complacency that sometimes is connected to discourse about gender equality within the sport of triathlon. There are some risks, there are some vulnerabilities. But today I'm going to talk about gender in participation and the imbalance of numbers. A recent conversation with a number of Triathlon Australia board members set me thinking. They lamented Triathlon Australia's relatively low proportion of women members. Out of 21,592 registered members across the 2015-16 season, only 39% were women. I say only 39%, but obviously compared to some other sports that's not too bad, but still. Was the cause for this imbalance, they wondered, related to finances, time or confidence? The number of participants in the all-women triathlon pink events held around Australia since 2007 remain relatively high. Why did those numbers not translate into ongoing involvement in the sport? Do we need a different approach in order to engage them, they ask? The conversation reminded me of a similar set of questions and concerns raised by the second president of the national governing body for triathlon in Australia 30 years ago. In 1987, Jeff Frost asked the readers of the Victorian State newsletter a question. He asked, "Why are there so few women in triathlon?" Among the diverse responses published in the following edition of the newsletter was a word of encouragement from a male veteran triathlete. Quoting him, "Thank heaven for little girls." He declared, assuring women readers that it was so much more pleasant being elbowed in the guts than kicked in the face by a female limb. The well-meaning respondent applauded the gutsy, non-fuss commitment of women triathletes and concluded with another well-known line from the Maurice Chevalier 1958 song, "They grow up in the most delightful ways." It's probable that female readers did not derive as much encouragement from the unknown contributor's patronising comments as he might have hoped. These two anecdotes point to a numerical gender imbalance in the sport of triathlon in Australia that has persisted across a 30-year period from 1987 to 2017. The imbalance is not imagined. A quick glance at race results and Triathlon Association membership figures affirms that fewer women commit to involvement than men. This table clearly represents just a very small sample of triathlons held in Australia. But from the range of event results that I've seen, and not included here, I would suggest that they offer a fair sense of the state of play in the mid-1980s. They also reveal that the number and proportion of women participating in triathlons in Australia closer to the present has, as might be expected, increased, but generally only to around 35% or so of the field. It is worth noting that rates of participation in Ironman triathlons, which are triathlons equivalent to the marathon, are considerably lower, but I won't try to explain that today. Institutional membership figures seem to point to similar proportions of participation. The membership figures are quite problematic, as you can see. Setting aside the absence of specific figures for female membership in a surprising number of instances, and a likely overestimation of participation rates, with sponsors in mind, in 2004, the statistics in this table still suggest that female participation rates in the past few years are not dissimilar to event participation rates, somewhere between 35% and 40%. Triathlon Australia membership information for the past few seasons is more reliable and supported by the results of a survey. Taking them as a further guide, it seems probable that women are rarely represented more than 40% of the field at events, except at women-only events, or greater than 40% of state and national association memberships. For the 2015-16 season, that equated to more than 4,000 fewer women than men. Accepting that these figures appear to suggest, that the rates of female involvement in the sport in Australia have drifted upwards, but still are not close to parity. This paper addresses specifically the question raised by the 2017 Triathlon Australian board members. How can we better engage women? However, in this paper, I will not offer the clear-cut answers they might be seeking. Instead, I aim to show that their objective is problematic for 3 reasons. First, it is worth noting that questions about female participation are often linked to efforts to monetise interest in triathlon through growth in membership revenues. It is likely that a need to address a significant drop in the sport's government and sponsor income due to a lack of medals at the Rio Olympic Games is also embedded in current hopes to address gender imbalance in the active triathlon populace. In the pursuit of a genuine answer, I believe that we need to ask questions about engagement without trying to make them serve a financial outcome. Second, a permanent shift towards parity in numbers has not occurred despite repeated efforts to address the issue over time across the 30-year period that I've talked about. This suggests that participation rates are influenced by a range of factors, not all of which can be manufactured or controlled by sports governing bodies or their associated committees. Finally, I would like to suggest that a wide range of intersecting cultural, structural, personal and incidental factors contribute to the decisions women make about participating in sport and how they feel about their sporting experiences. Many feminist sociological and historical studies of women's sport and empowerment point to the need to identify underlying structural inequalities, and culturally encoded understandings of sport that contribute to gender imbalance in sporting practice. Jennifer Hargraves, for example, advocates a reimagining of sport along lines that do not celebrate competitiveness and strength. Rosemary Deem and Sarah Gilroy define sport to include it as part of the concept of physical activity, so that they could include walking and dancing in their study of gender, sport and empowerment. Adele Pavlidis and Simone Fullagar found that women involved in a 9-day women's-only cycling event in rural Queensland demonstrated a form of cultural resistance to their regular identities as wife, mother, carer or daughter, that many expressed a new collective sense of identity, that they enjoyed focusing on the journey rather than the finish line, on the personal challenge rather than competition, and that feelings of power resulted from the development of technical cycling and bike management skills. So they've tried to redefine how women engage with the notion of sport. However, these insights only address a limited selection of female sporting experiences, and that's just one way of approaching the analysis of female involvement in sport. Other studies suggest that the health and fitness industry commercialised the image of the fit, sporty woman in the 1980s and 1990s, co-opting it into a new beauty myth that fostered individualistic false needs and ultimately deflected women who felt empowered through sport from challenging fundamental inequalities within sporting practice. Contemporary versions of this, enhanced by social media, are apparent today, of course. Yet other studies examine the challenges faced by sporting women who seek to confront biology-based gender stereotypes within sporting practice through demonstrations of strength, speed and competitive performance. So there's a lot of different ways of coming to and approaching this question of the gender imbalance in sport. A lot of them are cultural in nature, and my approach is cultural in nature as well. I think there is evidence to support many of these theoretical positions, not just one of them. Along with these perspectives, I'm influenced by historical methodologies that explain the way we understand the past and present in cultural terms. The historical subject and the object, the author and the reader, the collective and the individual, all embodied layered, intersecting and fluid subjectivities. Those subjectivities impact on the questions we ask, the way we understand the questions we are asked, the memories and words we choose to use when we answer them, the memories or personal truths we choose to forget or ignore when answering them, and the way we imagine someone else's experiences when they tell us about them. As will be seen, all of these perspectives are potentially relevant to the gender imbalance in participation rates in the sport of triathlon. In triathlon, it is fair to say that efforts to address the low rates of female participation were motivated by both financial and social justice concerns. From 1987 through the 1990s, considerable effort went into strategies aimed at securing in-principle forms of gender equality in triathlon. In Australia, the key early proponents of gender equality in the sport include Jenny McInnes, Louise Burke, and Laurie Cameron, all hailing from Victoria. Both Innes and Burke chaired the Triathlon Australia's Women's Committee in the 1980s, but stepped down due to workload. Laurie Cameron persevered much longer and played a key role in instigating the sport's International Women's Commission. Encouraged by the efforts of these women, representatives working on behalf of the women of their respective states introduced a variety of measures aimed at making mixed events more women-friendly, such as introducing childcare, and to prepare women novices for their first forays into triathlon by offering specialised information packets, seminars, camps and races. After considerable effort at the state, national and even international level, Cameron was eventually burnt out and possibly a little put off by her experience. In an interview, she hinted that layered motives were behind institutional encouragement of the women's committees. The early version of Triathlon Australia, TriFed, received its first federal government grant and a number of others over time to execute its plan to boost female membership numbers. So there is this role of funding in sort of leading to ticking boxes, etc. At the international level, the Women's Commission was taken as evidence of the sport's commitment to gender equity, or gender equality, which helped to secure Olympic recognition for the sport of triathlon. It is likely that there is some truth in Cameron's cynical suggestion that there are ulterior motives to looking for gender equality. In Australia, heightened economic concerns have consistently coincided with increased institutional interest in female triathlon memberships. The membership surveys cited above were conducted by the same individuals who were pivotal in securing government grants and commercial sponsors whenever the national governing body faced significant financial crises. I could tell you quite a lot about those if you want me to. Laurie Cameron represents just one participant in the mostly well-meaning campaigns to draw more women into sport. Although it appears that she offers a plausible explanation for the interest shown by triathlon governing bodies in female membership numbers, she offers no explanation as to why such effort on the part of committed feminists seeking gender equality did not result in lasting change or complete change. By the way, my look for the casual sexism, there's a little comment above here. Is this Elmer Furson's little sister? There's a few things embedded in the text there. All through this magazine, there's a tendency to highlight women as attractive in their sporting outfits rather than pointing to their gutsy efforts. Now to return to my script, I suppose. The more telling evidence in some ways comes from an online questionnaire I made available through SurveyMonkey for a 2-year period from 2011 to 2013 and promoted to Triathlon Australia members a number of times during that period. Approximately 300 people attempted the survey. It was quite long, the questions were difficult, it took a lot of effort to fill it out, and a lot of people didn't complete all the questions. A lot of people were just curious as to what was in the survey. So the survey is not useful as a statistical guide to the predilections of the Triathlon Australia membership. However, some women did provide quite substantial and occasionally moving insights into their triathlon experiences. For many women, social contact did represent one reason why they continued to engage in organised triathlon activities. Yet, when women respondents attempted to explain what they gained from that social contact and why they valued it, their answers varied considerably. Angela Clark, this is from her survey, participated in her first triathlon in 1984 because friends from her running club were also competing. She indicated that she valued triathlon club membership for the camaraderie, but did not rely on fellow members for motivation, encouragement or advice. In fact, Clark was an athletic high achiever and explained her ongoing involvement in the sport in individual competitive terms. Significantly, a number of women pointed to the value of women-only clubs, training and races. As one respondent explained, she did her first triathlon with females in training in Canberra. She joined them in 2004 because, and now I'm quoting from her survey, "My sister-in-law asked me to do the training program with her. As it was with all women, I felt comfortable about it. I really had not paid any interest to triathlon prior to that. Doing it with all women made it a less threatening environment. We were all novices, and it didn't matter whether you walked or finished." Females in Training, or FIT, originated in Canberra in 1995 when, according to former Triathlon Australia CEO Anne Gripper, a small interest group sought to encourage women to develop cycling skills. Through the 6-week training programs, the FIT founders sought to instill hesitant women with enough confidence to join already existent clubs and compete in events. Instead, FIT became a club in itself because many newly enabled women triathletes refused to leave. As another FIT member explained in her survey response, "I work in an 80% male organisation, live in a 75% male family, and compete in a 90% male cycling club. My 100% female triathlon club is great socially." Interestingly, Gripper did not recall some women-only Enticer triathlons and information sessions that were organised by the ACT Triathlon Association. This raises questions about communication and awareness of organisational aims and the mutual process involved in the gendering of a sport. Did or do women deliberately exclude themselves because of their perception of some sporting practices, activities and organisations as more relevant to men? Was this a deliberate form of exclusion or resistance to how they perceive triathlon as a sport? At the same time, gender-exclusive clubs and races do not explain the continued involvement in the sport of all women for whom it may have mattered at first. So some women started off in women-only training groups and then went to co-ed training groups. One respondent from Kalgoorlie joined a women's training group and attempted an all-women triathlon because it was on her bucket list. But once she finished, she was hooked. She subsequently joined a regular club because she wanted to continue to challenge herself and drew significant levels of encouragement from the mixed gender social network it offered. The respondent explained that she pulled out of one event because she hadn't been training properly and pretty much talked herself down so much during the ride that she quit partway through and went home. As she explained to me, or in the survey, my main group of supporters afterwards worked with me to get my head back into the right space. In the above account, the respondent gestures towards a combination of personal and social reasons for her continued participation in the sport, and also hints at why she might not have persisted. Both the sport itself, as well as the social contact afforded by club membership, were important because they helped to strengthen her self-esteem. Interestingly, she does not cite gender or point to gender-related issues as a factor in her decision to continue. For the survey respondent who joined FIT in 2004, a person who previously dabbled in a considerable range of other sporting activities, social contact was important but not the chief reason for persisting with triathlon once she was initiated into the sport, much like the woman that I've just referred to. Instead, she described feeling elated because I had achieved a great challenge. I felt like a true athlete. After finishing her first triathlon, she chose to do more because the challenge of going further and also of keeping fit. In this case, the respondent included in her explanation an immediate feeling, that is elation, an imagined ideal, that is being a true athlete, a physical benefit, that is fitness, and a form of aspirationalism. Each of these could be unpacked further, particularly the idea of a true athlete. To me, the takeaway point is that motives for female participation in triathlon, or other sport or sporting events for that matter, are too nuanced to pin down neatly. Other women respondents to my survey also offer multiple layered and entangled explanations for their willingness to persist with the sport, which likewise combine a range of cultural, social and physical, emotional and psychological factors. One respondent, for example, after she completed a team, competed in a team at the 2001 Noosa Triathlon, wrote such a long passage with so many different things to explain why she enjoyed it and why she continued to do triathlon. This is just a smattering of some of the things that she said. She liked the feeling afterwards. She wanted to feel it again. I felt excited. I felt driven. I also felt drained. The cheering from the supporters kept me going. The atmosphere of the arena was very hyped. The guidance from the officials was most helpful. No one in my first race was bossy, which assisted my desire to return. The main reason I like triathlons is the different disciplines. I also like the dedication required to complete the course. I like working to an end goal. I like the feeling of going across the finish line regardless of the position. It's very satisfying. I'm a larger woman and I find it a struggle to exercise and get into the finish line. I like doing something that my daughter also enjoys. So we see so many factors and reasons all tangled up and tied together. In this case, many factors combine in an oscillating explanation for persistence and participation in the sport. I've only touched on a small handful of survey responses and 2 interviews. There are many others that I could point to and draw out and will at some stage in the future, depending on funding. Returning to my original question, what does this sample of qualitative evidence reveal? What insight does it offer into the reasons why women do or do not engage with the sport on an ongoing basis? For many, the benefits of triathlon appear to be tied together with the social interaction. This does not simplistically mean that the social interaction that is sought, experienced or appreciated by one woman resembles the social interaction sought, experienced or appreciated by others. It simply suggests that for many women, and also men, triathlon is not completely an individual journey. But for some women, the valued social interaction came from strangers or from women-only environments. For some, it may have thus represented a form of cultural resistance, of women saying, I'm not just a wife, I'm not just a mother, I am someone who is being active and athletic. And I'm working on a memoir at the moment where the whole entire memoir is really about that whole sentiment, cultural resistance and being a triathlete and a runner as a form of cultural resistance. For others, triathlon experiences were meaningful because it involved their family members. So again, we can't pin it down to one thing or the other. Yet others articulated enjoyment of competitive rivalries with men and women in triathlon clubs or other informal social groups. But there is also a strong theme of personal challenge as well as health and fitness and related feelings of achievement and improved self-esteem. All of these might also be interpreted as a form of cultural resistance, in this case resistance to the biology-based gendering of personal and collective understandings of sport and sporting practice. To understand whether this is the case, I believe it is necessary to closely examine and unpack narratives of sporting experience, such as the ones that I've touched on today. It is also important to understand that when we ask questions about the sporting experiences of women or any target group, the researcher also brings to the study a host of their own subjectivities. One respondent critiqued my survey for not including questions about disability, and I'm much more enlightened now, thank you. And I was most mortified when I realised. One woman related vividly an observation that she made as a spectator, suggesting that she identified to some extent with a challenge faced by a fellow woman triathlete. This was a challenge that I had actually not thought about when I framed the survey. This is her account. I travelled to Busselton this year to support our local members who were competing in the half Ironman. There were many remarkable athletes there, but I think I was most impressed with the lady who is on the larger side, like me. She was doing the whole thing as an individual, and when she passed the first time on the run, you could see that her knees had been rubbing together, and she'd rubbed the skin off the insides of both legs in a long, raw strip. She would have been hot, sweaty, salty, and in a world of pain. But she kept going. I could not have predicted what these women would write because I have not lived their lives. I never thought about the issue of rubbing thighs, but I did include questions about hamstring problems because that's what I suffer from. Each woman had a reason for responding to the survey, and those reasons vary considerably. Within their responses, each woman selected specific words, particular memories, and presented a range of thoughts in discrete and unique ways. Many other women did not choose to respond at all, or to take up Triathlon Australia memberships, and thus remain unreachable for such interrogation. So what does this mean? What I'm confronted with is a historical problem and a research problem, and I believe a deeper problem when we come to questions about gender inequality in sport. The illusion of recoverable reality. It is almost impossible, futile in some ways, to reduce the plethora of minor and major choices that individuals make in reality and when they recount that reality sometime later, to a broad, sweeping conclusion that has no respect for the personal agency embedded in the minutiae of the past, in sporting experience, and the way in which individuals communicate their sporting experiences to others. Even statistical inaccuracies in part result from personal agency as well. With this in mind, it is necessary to rethink the way we address the problem of gender inequality in sport. We need to think at a deeper cultural level. If it is impossible to navigate the maze of memory, meaning, agency, and context to re-establish causal factors at an individual level, it is surely a cynical and disempowering idea to suggest that simplistic strategies will effectively manipulate women into commitment to the sport of triathlon, or any other sport for that matter. We can identify some patterns and commonalities, but we need to view them with an awareness of perpetually shifting contexts and the ability of individuals to resist, or at least to choose, between consumerist or institutional representations that attempt to prescribe human desires. As the evidence suggests, increased rates of female participation in triathlon are not inevitable, and any sports governing body seeking that outcome needs to look more deeply at why women do or do not engage in sport in order to find a solution.